let's move on into the presentation for tonight. Title is actually taken from a little discussion we had at our 350 steering committee meeting a couple of weeks ago. When I said I was really concerned about how I was going to heat my house in the winter because I have radiator heat and it's gas furnace, and I don't have a real fireplace, so I can't even burn my furniture when it gets really cold. So I didn't know what I was going to do. And Dan Folkman came up with some really interesting ideas and solutions about what people can do to convert. So the title for our evening production here that Dan Folkman and Charlie Bensinger put together for us is No More Fossil Fuels, How Not to Freeze Your Ass Off in the Dark. And so you want to take it away, Dan?
Yeah, that was exactly what took place, and that's a quote from Julie. She just blurted that out like instantaneously. So we, as Julie said, we were having this conversation, and I joined in on the committee, wanting to share with folks about a project that Charles and I have been doing informally over the last several months. I guess we started in December, and we called it a thought experiment. What will it take to do deep energy retrofits in our central city in preparation for what we've all struggled to accomplish here with 350.org, is that we want to keep that oil in the soil and the coal in the hole, only to realize that, Jesus, if we do that, how are we going to keep from freezing? So it's a pretty serious topic. And one of the things that the scope of the project is, there's about 116,000 single to four family housing structures in Milwaukee. That's a lot of buildings, a lot of energy retrofitting. Another way of looking at it is a lot of employment and job opportunities. And we could really have, as a nonprofit community-based organizations, pick up the gauntlet and say, we're going to have to do some serious support and investment in time, energy, and the like to accomplish retrofitting all these houses by 2050. The gas is supposed to be shut off probably at that time, if not before. So it's baked in. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. So how not to freeze our ass off in the dark. A little diagram over here in the corner. The first few slides we're going to be talking about is the triad here: furnace, boiler, heat pump, or hybrids. A lot of this is really challenging because the technology that's coming on board for us is not old technology so much as really what is called in many cases disruptive technology. These are really coming onto the market, really high performing equipment that takes a lot of skill and knowledge and experience in the installation of these things and in sizing the right system for the house that it's going to be installed in. And so there's really almost a custom design and planning that needs to be worked out with the consumer, in our case, our community low and moderate income residents, to make sure that what they're buying really does fit with the homes they have, with the level of energy conservation and retrofits that currently exist, and to what extent, if any, they'd be better off doing more weatherwizing and deep energy retrofitting in preparation for some of this new technology that's coming. I got here some scenarios which really came from our committee. and the notion was, what are the options when you decide to stop using gas? Early on, it's our choice. Later on, it's not going to be our choice. It's going to be really literally turned off. Natural gas, methane, greenhouse gas, if there is such a thing. What are the alternatives? And what are the strategies and green technologies for existing and new construction to bring our homes up to net zero carbon? A lot of stuff is going on in terms of bringing our new construction to net zero. And that's quite a different discussion than trying to bring up our existing homes to a net zero status. So this is some of the things that we'll be covering, and hopefully questions will come. Another one was the assumption of the Inflation Reduction Act. Who's with us now? Tomorrow you're going to do a presentation on the Inflation Reduction Act. I've been talking with a lot of builders and contractors and the like, and focus on energy folks. And there's a lot of people waiting to get real clarity on terms of what does the Inflation Reduction Act mean? How is it going to get translated into energy credits and tax savings and the like? So I'm going to probably play a low key on this one and wait for more clarity. For fear I'd just be making things up, and I don't want to be doing that. Should be admitted that switching to electric heating in a 1920s hot water radiator home, which is what a lot of our central city houses are facing with. How do you make that kind of switch from an 1819 old gas or boiler system to these new technologies? Here we have it. We have ducts. We don't have the ductwork for a forced air system. And what you're going to have is a really involved conversation with the salespeople, talking with you in terms of what are your options from their point of view. And in many cases, what they're doing with no malintent, they're going to be talking and exploring options that fit your house, but also accommodates the equipment that they're selling and could provide you. And how do you know you're getting the right fit? Give an example. We've got a very good friend who had a contractor come in to look at her house, and old furnace. And she wanted to talk about a furnace, maybe a heat pump for heating and cooling. And the package was included. If you buy this heat pump, we'll throw in a brand new furnace free. Now, what does that sound like? So, you're going to get all kinds of deals being presented. How do we help our community to work through those options? Another one is ground source heat pumps. Vertical and horizontal ground source loops. I can tell you, back in the 1980s, I was running, I worked at the university doing community education. And I was running workshops on energy conservation for homeowners. And I actually ran a program where people built and installed their own solar water heating systems. This is in the early first few years of 1980, before Reagan cut off the energy credits at the time. But we started offering informational workshops on ground source heat pumps. Went to Oklahoma, University of Oklahoma, to learn about it through their extension system. And these are just informational, 1 hour, hour and a half program for the general public. And on more than one occasion about these ground source systems, the guy comes up to me with his checkbook in his hand, and he says, "I don't care what it costs, I want one of these." And I tell him, there isn't anybody installing them yet. Now they're there, and they're really promising technology And I'm exploring ideas with some people about doing district heating with ground source loops along the backyards of our central city lot lines, so that there's some pretty serious discussion going on about some of this that hopefully will be coming available for us. Spoiler alert. It's absolutely necessary if our public policy advocacy for at 350.org, be careful what you ask for, you might get it. We're going to get our oil and coal and everything shut off. And now we have to rush like crazy to make sure we're prepared for it. We can absolutely do that right now with the existing technology we have. New technologies coming in, we just make it much more feasible. But feasible doesn't mean it's cheap and easy, but it's feasible. What we need to be talking about, not only the individual homeowner choice, but how do we deploy this existing technology to scale? As I mentioned a minute ago, we got 116,000 single to four family structures in the city of Milwaukee. Do the math in terms of, if we started today, how many deep energy retrofits would we have to do on a weekly basis or a daily basis to get to everybody before 2050? It's a staggering number. Here's one with what brought my attention to think about the issue on this scale was Bill McKibben. He published an article in February, March, November or December I think it was in the Atlantic, but he was actually advocating that as activists, we continue to do the pressure for keeping the oil in the ground and the banks from supporting all of this, but also to begin thinking about what it would take to implement and deploy the new technologies that are going to be required so that we actually do get this stuff shift to the sustainable kind of world that we're headed for, but it's going to take a lot of heavy lifting. And I think I'm literally excited about the opportunity of our nonprofit community playing a significant role in implementing and deploying this technology and helping our community residents, low and moderate income homeowners and tenants to be able to cope with what's coming. And that's where I'm getting to this one. If it takes a village to raise a child, it'll take a community enterprise to do retrofitting for all of our homes. So this is a massive scale that I think is very transformative. We've got no time to waste. We need to be doing 83 deep energy retrofits per week through 2050. 83 per week to get to that 116,000. How am I doing so far? It gets worse. One thing that I wanted to emphasize here is we've got furnaces, boilers, heat pumps, and then hybrid systems. And we've got different ways of rating the performance of these systems once they're installed. It's not only what their the specs are as they come out of the factory, to what extent, if any, does the installed unit actually perform to expectation, which in many cases would require it being sized properly and the like. But you're going to hear, if you haven't already, these terms here. AFUE for furnaces and boilers. This is a measurement for furnace efficiency over the year. And it ranges from 80 to 98% for furnaces, and the number 85 to 98 for boilers. Boilers are actually a little bit more efficient than a furnace. And I think it's primarily because a forced air system has leaky ducts where your warm air is traveling through, and so you can get some loss in the ducts where the boilers are actually circulating water through a closed pipeline. That's not much of a gain. It's only a few percentage points. But you're going to hear your salespeople talking about efficiency and the rating, and this is for over the year. For furnace and boilers, for heat pumps, you've got HSPF, and this is for the heat pump and its efficiency during the heating season. And you got a different number for the cooling season. So your heat pump could have two different numbers. Heating efficiency is on a scale from 7 to 10. Cooling is on a scale, SEER scale, from 14 to 25. And you're going to get equipment that's designed to be performing at some point along these ranges. And obviously, the higher the point, the better and more efficient it is, and also the more price it's going to cost you. Coefficient of performance is another way of rating a heat pump and its efficiency over the year, COP. And this ranges from 2.5 to 4 and even higher. Now we're getting into the range of 5. When a heat pump gets below its ratings, it drops to straight resistance heating. A lot of the heat pumps will, if they can't keep the house warm enough through the heat pump compressing system, it'll start heating your house with the straight resistance electricity, and that's really expensive. So you really want to be sure that we're sizing our system so that they can work effectively throughout the year. And if you're prepared to do some electric resistance heating, keep those days limited. Unfortunately, that's also going to be the time when it's the coldest time of the year.
Hey, Dan.
Any questions?
Yeah, Dan, could you explain to us how a heat pump works? What is a heat pump?
That's the next slide.
Charles is,
Oh, good.
yeah, we've got a couple of ways of talking about it. I'm going to give you one way, and then Charles has got some slides, and we'll discuss in more graphic form the heat pump, how it actually works. But that was really a good segue to this next slide. Now, this is going to be overwhelming a little bit. But when you put in a heat pump, you're going to have people talking about the heat pump really could work as a shoulder system and having a backup system, so that'd be a hybrid. Kicking in when the temperatures in the house and outside get cold enough, the heat pump can't keep up with the demand. And so you can switch over to your gas or oil or whatever the heating system, fossil fuel system is. This is an example, and I really like this set of slides. And let me try to talk you through it. This is a house that's located in Atlanta, Georgia. So it's down south. It's a 2,300 square foot home, and it's built with a heat load of 31,452 BTUs per hour. That means that on the coldest night of the year, your house is losing 31,400 BTUs per hour for the duration of that cold snap. So it has, this is 31,000. When I looked at that, this represents a really highly efficient, weatherized, I'd even say deeply retrofitted home. This is a really tight home, 31,000. The heat pump that was installed for this house, if you look up here at the title of the article, my undersized heat pump, he purposely installed a heat pump that was under capacity, could not perform at the full load of the house, which also tells me he's got a very energy efficient home there. And so the heat pump can deliver 20,500 when the house is needing to have 31,000, unless it's very well insulated. And it's undersized both for heating as well as cooling. The total cooling demand for the house is 21,000 BTU, and the heat pump itself can deliver 18,000 BTU. So again, I said, well, this is really interesting. I hope I'm making sense to you, but this is what's going to be under discussion anytime you're talking with a contractor and you want to know whether or not the new equipment is going to service the needs of the house. To a great extent, it's all about BTU heating and BTU cooling, and how much the house needs from the equipment that you're installing. I got excited, believe it or not, with this graph here. This is saying that this heat pump with these specs, undersized for the house, the coldest night of the year was 7 degrees Fahrenheit. That's pretty darn cold in Atlanta. And it kept the house at 63 degrees Fahrenheit. You can see it only, this was the lowest point during this time period, 63. Otherwise, it was the actual temperature was going up. As the temperature outside goes up, the house gets better, goes up better, goes up better. So these peaks reflect each other. But this is the game here. What system do we need to keep the house at a set temperature, in this case, 63 degrees? That's a choice by the homeowner or the customer. But the equipment you install needs to be able to keep that temperature as the outside temperature drops. It was 17 degrees this morning here in Milwaukee. This here would have been able to just go through 17 degrees without much of an effort. Now, this unit it's a mini split system. It's a Mitsubishi system. It's also called hyper heat pump. This is one of the most highest performing heat pumps on the market. There's a number of them coming. And so you're going to be hearing a lot about heat pumps, hyper heat pump technology. This person in this house in Atlanta had a highly efficient, energy efficient, insulated home, and he still bought the best heat pump he can buy. And it's doing its work. It's also keeping the other rooms in the house, and that's what this is all about. This is other rooms in the house. He's monitoring the temperature in these separate rooms, and they all follow the same curves, and there's very little variance, which is, at a glance tells you this system was keeping the house really nice and toasty, at least at the 63 degree range. So does it perform when it's needed? Does it keep all the rooms in a reasonable temperature range? This one is saying the hourly heat pump energy use. I love this, because here's the temperature curve. That's the same curve up here, but now it's showing how hard was the heat pump working in order to keep during this time period the 60 degree Fahrenheit. This is crucial stuff, folks. And this Mitsubishi hyper heat pump was coasting along, and then it started really pumping out when that temperature dropped. Got a little fluctuation, but it was really pumping out to keep that 63 degree temperature set. So this again is saying we have equipment in today's technology to be able to carry the load if it's all balanced and sized properly. This one is a graph of, okay, how much energy does all this movement here represent? And here's that cold snap during this time period. And you can see that, yeah, as you would expect, you're going to be drawing more kilowatt hours when that temperature drops. And I remember reading somewhere, I couldn't quite find it, but I think this said that during this time period, it was consuming about 80 kilowatts. Keep that house
So that's about $13.
about $13. So not, it's doing what it's supposed to do, but look at what was the structure itself, how well it was built, how tight it is, so that the high performing heat pump needs to be in a unit, in a space and in a house and in a structure that's really prepared to accommodate it.
Dan, could I interject in here a little bit
Sure.
in response to Julie's question? In terms of how does a heat pump work, two things that I'd mention is, first of all, your refrigerator is a heat pump. You know that if you open the door, that it's cool inside. Many, if not all of us, have had the experience of being behind or feeling the wind, I guess, in a sense, in the back of a refrigerator. Sometimes you can feel it pushing out around the sides or even underneath or above. And there's warm air coming out on that side. So there's a compressor in the refrigerator which is transferring heat from the air inside the refrigerator to the air outside of the refrigerator. And you know that that happens both in the summertime and in the wintertime, which frequently the temperature in your house is at two different temperatures. So the principle of heating your house with a heat pump and transferring the heat from one place to another can happen across a number of different mediums, which Dan has referenced, either air to air, air to liquid, or liquid to liquid. But the effect is really demonstrated by the way your refrigerator works. And that's also demonstrated by, if you're in the summertime, you're out in the sun or wherever, even in the house, if it's not air conditioned and it's hot, and you begin to heat up, you begin to sweat. Or another option is you might put water on yourself. The evaporation of the water off of your skin is transferring heat effectively in the end from your blood vessels across your skin into the air. And that is accomplished because the water is evaporating off your skin, and it takes heat in order for that to happen. So there's a transfer of heat out of your body into the water, and the water, as it evaporates, cools, which draws the heat out of your body. And that is effectively how a heat pump works, except on a much larger scale than either your skin or a refrigerator.
So I have a question. Doesn't it take electricity to operate the heat pump itself?
Yes.
And that's what this graph is showing, that to operate the heat pump, as Greg described so well, to keep the temperature at 63 degrees, it's using this electricity, this amount of electricity, and this total graph here. So this is really showing you the relationship to when the temperatures drop, the heat pump is working harder.
If I could add a couple of things.
Oh, Phil, please do.
Yeah, so I love that explanation of how a heat pump works. And the critical thing in all that is that it's moving heat. Most of our heat pumps in Wisconsin, this area, will be air-to-air ones. So we're moving heat from outside. Even if it's cold, all the way down to 15, you can still suck heat out of that air. You move it inside, and then you release the heat inside in a mini split or perhaps in your ductwork. So that's the key thing. You are not how the fossil fuel furnaces work. They're burning, a fossil fuel to create heat. This is not. And so because of that, they're 3 times more energy efficient. So that's the key. They're highly, highly efficient compared to the fossil fuel ways of going about it. And they still cost money in terms of the electricity needed to run the compressors to compress the refrigerant. And that's how you move that heat from one to another. So anyway, it's a great idea. And the Public Service Commission in Wisconsin estimates that you will save, if you switch from a propane, which I have here, a propane furnace, to a heat pump, about $500 per year. And that is significant money. I will still have to pay for the electricity, but I'll make it up in the reduced propane. Natural gas is not as much because that's less expensive, not as much of a savings.
I'd
So
like,
Dan, go to the next slide. I think it has a picture of how the heat pump works.
Well, I'm going to do, I'm going to, because you're next here, and your discussion will echo what we've just been talking about, but I want to draw the connection between how the heat pump works and these efficiency numbers. The same principle is operating as you described, but the unit itself can be rated in terms of its power and its efficiency on a scale, in this case, from 7 to 10. If you put in a heat pump that's operating exactly as you described, but it's designed to perform at this level, but your house requires higher demand, we've got to make sure that our consumers understand that this is what determines whether or not that heat pump works. Is it properly sized? You could have a totally perfectly operating heat pump system, but it's undersized and you won't be happy. So I'm trying to convey here, a heat pump is a heat pump, but depending on how it's manufactured and what goes into it, and the compressors and all the other equipment determines whether or not it really will meet the demands of your house. So sizing the heat pump to the demand of the house is crucial in the decision-making process. That's what I really wanted to say before we got into the discussion. This graph here and these information is really telling you, in a well-designed house, properly performing heat pump, that's hyper heat pump, that's on top of the line, can do the work that it's designed to do. This heat pump, yeah. So with that, Charles?
Okay, so we're looking at different ways to address this whole issue of energy efficiency. And we have a couple options here. We have the deep energy retrofits, which essentially is looking at how we can make the house tighter and move closer to, something that is really efficient. And we're going to be looking at pros and cons of heat pumps, and also the need for public education, which Dan referred to. How do we educate the public about the complex technical issues that this kind of entails? And then, of course, this comes down to, again, what Dan has been addressing. How do we design the heat pump to match the particular building or the needs of a building, and in terms of a retrofit strategy? Okay, next slide. So the key to that, of course, is conducting an energy audit. That's where you want to start first. You want to find out exactly how many BTUs your house or your room or your garage or your studio really needs. And the trick there is to match the BTU of the heat pump to the BTU requirements of the room. And to get there, we want to seal air leaks and add insulation. You want to, you might want to look at different models here. You want to go with a better furnace or a better boiler or with the heat pump. Then you have to explore looking at your appliances. You might want to put in a induction stove, for example, convert your hot water heater to electricity. So you could perhaps run that off the heat pump as well. And then consider adding solar panels or geothermals. And then you want to actually look at energy saving behaviors, such as turning off the lights and electronics when not in use. And of course, it always helps to be able to monitor energy usage and track those savings so you can optimize the system. There are situations where people do all this, but they don't really change their behavior. And so they can't really take advantage of the increased efficiency of all the new technology they put in the house. Next slide. Here's what a heat pump condenser looks like. So we're looking at upgrading and replacing all the heating, cooking, and electrical appliances, eliminating the energy leaks and insulating the house, and exploring replacing that old gas furnace or boiler with a new high efficiency model. And here are some of those ratings that Dan referred to, the AFUE or the SEER, the various labels that come with the different type furnaces. And then, of course, we can replace the gas furnace with a heat pump, or we keep the gas furnace and the heat pump is there as well. And so when the temperature drops down below a certain level, if the heat pump can't keep up with that, it switches back to your gas furnace system. Looks like Patricia has a question.
Well, I was going to tell my experience with a heat pump. I've had one for 16 years. I bought a Maytag, which was top of the line at the time. And the first one destroyed itself because one of the maintenance workers put too much coolant in it. It just rocked back and forth. And the fan came off inside and just destroyed the interior. So they gave me a new one. That was after 4 years of having it. So I have a new one. It's an 18 SEER heat pump.
Mhm.
So after the 4th year, I got a new one. They just replaced it for me. And it mainly works well when the temperature is between 40 and 50 degrees. Otherwise, it really doesn't work for me that well. The house feels rather cool, cooler than I like it to feel. It saves a little bit on my energy bill, but not enough to make me want to go out and get another heat pump. What I want to do is I would like to get rid of all of it and just have my neighbor put in a huge solar panel. He put in where you dig down into the earth. What's that called?
Ground source.
The what?
Ground source.
Yeah. So he did all of that, and then he's got some passive solar. So I don't know. I really encourage people to think about before they spend a lot of money on a heat pump, to really know what you're getting, because I don't think it works that well. Maybe I just need a better heat pump, but I don't know how much more efficient they can become. I suppose 25 is better than 18.
Yeah, my HVAC person gave me an estimate on my house here in Shorewood, and he's got a heat pump which he uses with his radiant floor system, and he said it went down to 25, no problem here, and kept him nice and warm, 25 degrees.
Mm.
Next slide.
Well, I just want to emphasize, everything that's being talked about is absolutely right on. And I think our message here is there's no free lunch. The technology is improving, and it's improving dramatically. But you're going to use this heat pump technology looking at where your house is and its energy capacity and demands, and sizing it appropriately. If you don't do that, you can have the kinds of experiences that we're hearing. Phil?
Yeah, I just want to say in my presentation, I go through some of this stuff, and in Northern Europe, in Maine, heat pumps are being installed, a huge number of them. They're just exploding. The Inflation Reduction Act is going to have a point of sale rebate coming in next year between $4,000 and $8,000 for moderate and low income people. This is huge. Heat pumps are going to be installed throughout our country, and it's going to take us by storm. There's even money for companies to build new factories to make them, because there's going to be so much need for them. And yes, they can go all the way down. You have to get the high SEER ones. The older ones weren't as efficient. The new ones are going to be much more efficient. And in Wisconsin, yes, you still need the auxiliary heat on those cold days below about 15 degrees Fahrenheit. You are going to need to have electric resistance heating, or perhaps tag on your propane or natural gas to kick in on those really cold days. But even given that, there's still savings. And the Inflation Reduction Act is all in on it. It's huge. Big tax breaks and big point of sale rebates. And that literally is, I got 2 estimates for a heat pump for my 2,000 square foot home here. It's about $12,000 to put it in to my ducted system. And I could actually qualify for $4,000 off that. So it'll only cost me $8,000. So it's really big. This is going to happen. It's a lot of real cool things are coming in with the Inflation Reduction Act. I am totally excited about it.
I
I'd
think
like to
Okay.
say one more thing about something else that I have in the house. I bought an induction cooktop and I love that. There is no burner effect from gas. It cooks things very fast, is very efficient. I love induction. So if you can get an induction cooktop, do it.
Good to know.
There's going to
Okay.
be $800 point of sale rebates on those too. So that's also in the Inflation Reduction Act.
Wow, that's good to know.
Yeah, a lot
Okay.
of rebates coming up.
Okay, here's just a sort of a simple graphic. You can see how it takes the cool air outside and turns it into heated air inside in the winter, and does just the reverse in the summer. Takes the heated air outside and converts it into cool air, which it sends through your house in the summer. Here's a graphic of how it works. You can see on the left there, the cool air is coming in. On the far left, it goes through the coil, and the cold air is conducted or changed into hot air, which is then emitted inside the house. You can see it running across there. It goes through an exchange process. There's a fluid that runs through there. That's what's going on at that point in time. That fluid is conducting the heat, in that case, through the wall of the house into the interior of the house, where it provides the hot air. And then once it's lost its heat to the inside, it becomes cooler, obviously, goes back out and is repressurized and completes the cycle. So the condenser, you have the condenser outside, and then you have the various duct systems inside, and they can take various forms. And we'll see that on the next slide. Okay, there's the heat pump. I think this is a complete system here, which is sitting in a window situation there, and it's providing both the heat and air conditioning for that room. It's a one-piece type unit. Next slide. If you're using what's called a mini split, you might have a number of these in different rooms. And so you can adjust the temperature for each room independently. This is a Mitsubishi heat pump. And it says here it can provide 100% of heating down to 5 degrees. It'll even go down to -13 without auxiliary heat. You may not get a nice toasty 68 degrees inside, but you'll still be fairly warm. Then if you get their electric H2I, which is probably an auxiliary heating, electric heating of some sort, you can have your heat down to -5 degrees. And so these, they sometimes call them cassettes, that can be located in the ceiling, actually, so they're pretty much invisible, or on a wall mount like this. And a house may have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of these units in different rooms, and each room can be adjusted independently if people like different kind of temperatures in different rooms. Next slide.
Before we go here, I'll just give you an example. Like Pat, my wife had us install a Mitsubishi heat pump, maybe 10, 12 years ago. And it is designed, and we use it mostly for air conditioning. Its cold temperature range is closer to 30 degrees, and it just can't keep up after 30 degrees. So that, again, you need to know what your rating is. But our compressor, the unit that sits outside for our house, that's the compressor, is for our house, it's right by our door as we walk into the house. And on the hottest days of the summer, I walk up past the compressor and I can feel the air and hear the fan blowing, but I cannot hear unless I really, really listen for the compressor. I mean, it's so quiet and so smooth. And the same thing for the head in our living room. We don't even hear it. So these systems are really well performing, but they got, again, be sized properly by 30 degrees, we physically turn off our heat pump and we then rely completely on our gas boiler. Charles, next.
Yeah, here's an example of a kind of a do-it-yourself system. You can buy actually at Lowe's or Home Depot, and there you can see this, the compressor, and you see the duct system up there on the top. You don't have a thermostat on the wall in these systems. You have a remote, and you can walk around to different rooms with your remote and set the different air duct units or cassettes to different size temperatures, which is kind of a cool thing. And then you can see down below there, there are a whole bunch of different models. Some are 120 and some are 220. And presumably, you know, this would do fine in a garage, let's say, or a studio or a single room. And it's only $1,000, which is pretty good. But you probably need some skills, you know, on installation to be successful with this. Next slide. Okay, here's what's called a mini split with multiple zones. This one's $6,000, but you can see this one comes with 5 ceiling cassettes for 5 different rooms, or sometimes they're called air handlers. And you can, as it says, you can control the different cassettes individually to get different temperatures. And let's see here. Well, it talks about the condition having gold fin coating, which keeps it from corroding. They have a limited warranty covered for 7 years, parts covered for 5. This probably does, I'm pretty sure this does not include installation. So you're probably looking at another 1,000 or 2,000 for installation. The bid I got for my house, which is probably about 1,000 square feet, was about $10,000. And he said, well, you can get $1,300 back from Focus on Energy. And if you upgrade your furnace, you can get another $2,000 back from the feds. He didn't know exactly what the Inflation Reduction Act could provide, but I have a slide on that coming up a little bit later. Next slide. Okay, here's some information on costs. Mini split condensers can be $1,000 to $6,000. Each indoor air handler might be an additional $400 to $2,000. You can mix and mash those. Down at the bottom here, a mini split system can cost anywhere from $2,000 to $14,000, depending on how many air handlers you have and depending on your installation costs. Next slide. Here's the pros and cons. Okay, let's go through this. This is pretty interesting. Decarbonization, 200 to 300% greater efficiency than a gas furnace. Asthma reduction. These units have heavy duty filters in them, air filters. So you have better air quality in the home. So we know that asthma is a super problem here in Milwaukee. So anything we could do to create better air quality would have a very beneficial effect on our asthma rates. So that's something that's pretty serious and pretty important. You're not going to get that with a furnace. You know, in the furnace, you're going to have all kinds of weird stuff in the vents if you have a vent system. If you haven't cleaned them out, but still, it's just blowing all kinds of stuff into the house. Less humidity. These remove air, moisture from the air. So you've got, that's a good thing here because we have extremely high humidity most of the year. Lower energy bills, could save $400 to $500 a year. Save space. You got both an air conditioner and a heating system here. Less noise, quieter than an air conditioner. Improved safety, no gas leaks. So you're not worried about natural gas and its potential for explosions. Here are the cons, more mechanically complex. There are no US manufacturers at present. All these units are made in China or somewhere in Korea, I would imagine. And that's a problem. I've heard the installers are complaining about that they're unable to have good stocks of parts for these. And it requires more maintenance. You have to be sure you are taking good care of it. It's more expensive, obviously, than a regular system. And the technicians are not fully experienced yet in installation and repair. So they're going to have to spend a bunch of time on the phone talking to the different companies, and hopefully they have good representation here in the United States. That will hopefully change with time. Next slide. Okay, here's an example of a window heat pump. This is the Frigidaire, and it's saying it can cool a space up to 1,000 square feet, provide supplemental heat at 16,000 BTUs. So this gets back to Dan's statement about the necessity of matching the BTU capability with the requirements for the room. This one's 230, and the price is $600 at Home Depot. This will fit right in a window in a room. And that might be a pretty low cost option if you just, only have to heat a few rooms. And this may be the ticket for renters. Next slide. Okay, here's a chart showing the financial assistance. This is actually for North Carolina, where 40% of the homes now have heat pumps. 40%. That's pretty astounding. This confirms what Phil is saying about heat pumps really taking over here. But look at this. You can be making up to $130,000 a year and get up to $2,000 off. But if you're less than that, you can get $8,000 presumably off the cost.
Yeah.
So these are pretty astounding numbers, really.
Yeah, if I could add real quick, the 30% tax credit up to $2,000, that's available today. So if you went out and bought one, you can get that on your taxes next year. And then, like you say, that's for anybody. The income tests, that's coming out probably not till next year. That has to go through the state. They have to develop a whole program. So it's in the Inflation Reduction Act. It's just that it won't start happening till sometime next year.
Great, thank you, Phil. Next slide. Okay, factors to consider: age and condition of your existing system. Is it about to fail, or is it pretty low efficiency? Might be time for an upgrade. And do you think that the heat pump might be the best way to go? So this really comes down to your specific needs and your circumstances. It's critical to consult with a qualified HVAC professional who can help you determine what's going to be the most effective and efficient heating solution for your home. Next slide. Okay, here are the things to keep in mind. Do your research. Understand the pros and cons of each type of system and what might work best for your home and climate. Choose a qualified contractor who really is well-versed in the latest technology. And that's probably a challenge right now because there aren't probably too many people that are well-versed in it. I mean, I think they're working on it, but a lot of these folks are probably moving fairly slowly because they're comfortable with the old technology, and sometimes it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. So we have to kind of be patient with that aspect, I guess. Get multiple bids. Don't just go with the least expensive. Look for the rebates and incentives. Consider the whole system: heating and cooling, ductwork, insulation, and maybe look at an induction stove, and what else you can add in your home that can reduce energy use. Think about the long-term savings or the lifetime cost, not just the initial capital cost. And of course, consider adding or switching to a heat pump. Next slide.
Before we switch, do your homework, get competitive bids. One of the real challenges on getting multiple bids is making sure you're not comparing apples and oranges.
Yeah, that's real
With
important.
all these different rating systems and the like, again, I would emphasize working with our communities and our low and moderate income families, homeowners and renters, making sure you got comparable bids makes all the difference. And
Okay,
it's not
next.
easy to tell.
Here's a fairly complex chart that Dan put together. We're not going to spend much time on this because we don't have a whole heck of a lot of time here. But I'm thinking that if you want to go into more detail and study these slides, Greg can probably put them up on the website, and you can go back and look at this chart and some of the others. Next slide. Okay, here's something that's pretty interesting. New York City is wanting to convert its public housing to heat pumps. So they're willing to spend $70 million to purchase 30,000 heat pumps for public housing. Now, I'm kind of assuming that these are going to be window mounted heat pumps. And I've spent a lot of time with 350.org in Milwaukee, looking at the whole energy burden thing for Milwaukee. And what we get stopped at all the time is, what do we do about the renters? This may be the solution for the renters. I mean, if we could come up with some funding for providing window units for renters, they can take that unit with them when they move to the next building. And we're not having to deal with the landlords. Anyway, in New York, they're going to install 60 units in the winter to test them out, see how practical they are. And they have this organization called Clean Heat for All Challenge. And they've found 2 different companies, and they've ordered 10,000 from the one company and 20,000 from the other company. And their criteria is that they must be made in the United States. They don't want to be spending all this money on Chinese equipment. And so hopefully in the next year or so, we're going to see a whole new generation of high efficiency window mounted and maybe centralized system heat pumps coming out thanks to New York City. So why can't we deploy some of these units and this kind of an approach in Milwaukee as well?
If I could add real quick, the Inflation Reduction Act does have money for renters, rebates for renters for those window units.
Wow, that's great.
I forget the number, but it's significant.
Okay, now we come down to what Dan has mentioned back at the beginning here, the importance of community education. As you can imagine, this is a fairly complex issue. So what we need to do is help people understand this whole issue of energy efficiency. People will need to understand how HVAC systems work, the different choices, furnaces, boilers, heat pumps, providing guidance for contractors, the issues of tax credits, grants, loans, green mortgages, and so on, the importance of maintenance, and how do we begin to start that process. Dan's created something called the Community Benefit Organization, or CBO, and his thought is that we could utilize these CBOs to provide that kind of one-on-one assistance and help people, navigate the waters here, so to speak. Next slide. Okay, here are some organizations in Milwaukee that I've identified that already are working on these kinds of issues. And so the question to us is, how might we partner with them? Revitalize Milwaukee has 12 million in new energy funding from the city to do exactly this, do energy upgrades. Now, we don't know what that means exactly, but they've got a mandate to go ahead and try to do some of this stuff. And there you can see several of the other community organizations. So this is about all we have on the slides, I think. And it may be time for discussion. Looks like Greg has something to say.
In terms of planning for putting in a heat pump or any other upgrades that you're doing to your house, the Inflation Reduction Act provides for rebates, actually tax credits, which, as has been discussed, have limits per year on them. Putting in a heat pump for the majority of homeowners will require an upgrade in your electric service. So one of the things you might be wanting to look at is 1 year before you put in the heat pump is doing an upgrade to your electric service. We Energies, for those of us who are in their territory, also has some additional incentives for that. So you want to look at it as probably a multi-year project in order to, if you want to make the most of the incentives that are available. So it'll take a little bit of planning.
Yeah. Next slide, Dan. Could you flip to the next slide? Jan?
Okay. My understanding is that when you are deciding if you want to put in a heat pump, you have to have an evaluation as to whether it will work more efficiently with your furnace or boiler, or is it better to just get the heat pump and eliminate the furnace or boiler? But then how does that work with renters? Do they just turn off their furnace and put this in? And how do they know that's the most efficient thing to do?
Well, I'm assuming if a renter had a heat pump in one of their windows, they would just turn down their furnace or, you know, to a very low level, or turn it, they can't exactly turn it off, but they could, well, I guess they can turn it off, but they could close their vents or whatever and just run their heat pump during the winter for added heat, and then run it during the summer for air conditioning, and not use their, you know, their in-house system that is provided by the landlord, unless their utilities are covered in their bill, I guess, in their rent. Then it wouldn't make much sense.
Well, how would they determine which is the best way to go? Just,
Well, if they have to pay for the utilities, then they're better off with the heat pump if they can reduce their bill to We Energies. Well, you know, they reduce the gas part of the bill, they won't reduce the electrical part.
okay, thanks.
If I can add something that really connects the education here. I hope you're getting the impression that we're totally in favor of this technology and we're thinking it's really transformative. But the complexity of it and the role for our community-based organizations to assume a different kind of relationship with the community, almost as a broker or intermediary between the homeowner, the installer, and this technology, and really educating, coaching, and supporting our consumers, our residents as consumers of this technology, I think is a vital need in the community. I think this is what Bill McGibbon is saying to his 350 global movement, that we've got to start thinking about how do we not only resist the support and continuing support of fossil fuels, but begin to work collaboratively with our residents and our installer communities and the like to get this equipment installed, deployed appropriately, and functioning for the benefits of the community. And 350 here in Milwaukee, part of this Milwaukee County task force, the whole half of that task force was readying our community for dealing with climate change and all that is going to be coming with it, but also achieving justice and equity and jobs and job training. There is nothing ever like what's facing us today in terms of the opportunity and the magnitude of the problem that we have. Don't see it as a problem, see it as a way to reframe our community activism. We've got a meaningful role to ensure that people get these jobs, they're trained properly, and with 120,000 homes needing to be deeply retrofitted, we got an endless stream of jobs. We've never had this opportunity before. And I'm trying to find a space where we can really create a circle of dialogue among our community activists organizations to say, if we don't step to the plate and really figure out how we can be part of this solution, what's coming will be just passed over us. All the profits and wealth will be extracted as people install this equipment, may or may not be installed properly. But if we have a real opportunity to become part of that system, I call it a community enterprise. And 30 years of endless work is at the door here. And we have a role to play if we choose to do it. We've got to educate ourselves to see how that could happen and how we have to reframe a lot of what we do in the name of climate, justice, equity, health reasons. These deep energy retrofits are making the homes much more healthy, sustainable. It's endless, but it takes time to discuss about all of this sort of stuff. I'm pumped by it, and I've never been as optimistic as I am watching what's coming and realizing the opportunity. My fear is we won't be able to bring ourselves to the challenge, and we'll lose the opportunity to actually create a world that we've been struggling for all of my life. Phil, I see you nodding your head or disagreeing.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head, Dan. Awesome. because the Inflation Reduction Act thought about folks like you, thought about organizations like 350.org, and you, I'm pretty darn certain you can be part of obtaining large grants. There's hundreds of millions of dollars of grants. And actually some of the grant applications are due shortly for organizations for the city of Milwaukee, for the state of Wisconsin. And the whole idea of it is to get other community organizations to come into the planning to work out how all these rebates and weatherization and all the things that are occurring within the Inflation Reduction Act, how that's going to be implemented. So there is a role. And if I was you, if you really want to get into this, dive into the Inflation Reduction Act. I know CCL has a whole sections on explaining those grants and what's going on with it. It's a big deal. And so yeah, there's a role.
There's a role, and as I said earlier at the beginning, that Charles and I have been engaged in a thought experiment in terms of the magnitude of deep energy retrofitting. All the houses in the central city represents 30-year careers in the 21st century technology and job skills that are coming our way. Just think in terms of if a community or a group of community organizations set up their own nonprofit cooperative factory to do deep energy retrofits and panelized new construction for our central city, we'd be at the table of multiple decision points, both private sector and public sector. I could walk, if we had a factory and we had employees and we were projecting workloads and hiring new hires, we can walk into MATC and not ask them to offer more training, but tell them specifically, these are the skills we need for the people we're hiring. We will be hiring them, or we have the opportunity to prepare ourselves for this. It's a different game, and I think this is what Bill McKibben is talking about. Rethink our social activism and transform ourselves to be ready for the demand that's coming and to be able to take advantage of it. I hope I'm making sense in this.
Richard, I see you put your hand down now, but you had it up for a while. Is there something you want to jump in on, or?
You know, this discussion is real interesting, and I think we all have a role to play, if not ourselves installing a unit in someone's house. But
yes,
if someone has some questions, maybe us, as if you do some research, personal research, maybe we can answer a couple questions, you know, so for us in 350.org. But I did have a question about the those cassettes that are where the heat comes through. And I thought maybe that you could force this heat from a heat pump through your gas furnace's ducts, but that's not a case.
it is.
Yes, it does. That's the way it works.
Oh, you can't. Oh, then
Yes.
what are these
Yeah.
cassettes that you put up on a wall? I don't understand that.
That's if you don't have a forced air system.
Oh, okay, good. All right. That's the only question I had. Thanks.
Yeah, they're called hybrid systems, where you have your conventional forced air furnace, and you have them right now already. Your air conditioner is distributing the conditioned air through the existing duct system. So all of this stuff is there. The cutting edge technology are just really fantastic enhancements and performance to this technology that we're prepared to do this.
Yeah, so if you haven't,
we have the opportunity to be part of the game.
yeah,
Otherwise,
if you have the old fashioned, you know, a radiator system, it merely heats the water that goes to the radiators, right? If you have a forced air system, it just puts heat into your vents, basically, and delivers the warm air to your rooms via the vents.
Right.
Okay.
And basically, you know, in a ducted air system, if you have an air conditioner outside, you have the coils sit in the ductwork right above the furnace, and that's what cools that air, right? Well, they just turn it around. The heat pump uses a similar coil. You have to replace it because it's a different, little bit larger coil, but that's what sits in a ducted system.
Okay.
Right.
Huh.
Tom,
Yeah, So, and I'm not remembering the guy's name who works for the city of Milwaukee, Eric. And
Schaumburger.
Stromberger. So do we need to talk to him, one? And then two, do we need to work with him and find out, identify who he thinks are the city groups that we should be talking to get them on board on this? I don't know if that's kind of my first strategy on how to move forward with this. And maybe somebody's got a better idea, but it sounds like that would be a way for us to start moving on this.
Bill?
Yeah, I gave a presentation to it was either the Milwaukee County or City of Milwaukee Office of Sustainability. And at the time it was CCO's carbon pricing presentation, but those guys would be the ones to talk to. I would start there and ask them, is there a role for us? Are you already applying for the grants in the Inflation Reduction Act? And can we be a part of that, for instance? And just see what he thinks.
I think that's a good idea, but I'd also, in one of our slides, Charles has listed half a dozen or so community organizations that are already engaged in a very deep and meaningful way to join in on that circle to see how we could collectively work together. I think we could collectively, but right now the city has an RFP out for private company to come in with a panelized factory for new construction. The RFP is out. I've looked at it. I've attended some of their seminars for it. I think we really have the opportunity to talk with the city and with the county. We got the task force passed, for goodness sakes, but begin to lay the groundwork in cooperative planning and visioning with our fellow community organizations to reframe what the role is for us for the next 30 years. The next 30 years, we're going to be coping with climate change on a scale we haven't yet seen. We're only getting glimpses of it. Let's be prepared, folks. And we need houses that not only have heat pumps, but their entire retrofitting of these houses so that they're prepared to be able to deal with what's coming from the climate. I'm convinced if we do it right, and that's not easy to do, we do it right, we'll add another 100 years of life to these houses that are right now on the brink of destruction on a massive scale. Again, I'm pleading for our community organization to say, let's get together and figure out what we need to be able to do. Otherwise, the old story will play out. The private sector will grab and peel off the assets, the wealth, and we're left with nothing. We can make sure that wealth stays in our community if we live to our espoused values, but it's going to require a completely different approach to our community work.
Yeah, I did the math. If we got 115,000 homes that need retrofitting, if we put $30,000 into each of those homes, that's about $35 million. So somewhere, someone would have to come up with $35 million to make all that happen. Which isn't a whole lot of money for a whole city.
Saying it's not someone, what are we going to do to come up with that? It's not somebody else's problem, it's our opportunity. And can we rethink what we have to do? Citizen Action for the last number of years have been doing self-funding for community organizers. Get 200 people willing to commit $20 a month. That pays a $40-some thousand salary for a community organizer. This is self-funding through grassroots community initiatives. There's all kinds of green creative banking scheme frameworks that are becoming available. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. The city RFP for this panelized factory system has a compendium report that outlines some of the kind of creative green funding that might be available. Again, our community organization, let's get our heads together around some of this stuff and get to the economic tables where these decisions are being made.
So Mark corrected my math, 3.5 billion. I guess my calculator doesn't go into billions. So it's $3.5 billion, not 35 million.
Yeah, 116,000 homes. That's enough work to keep a whole lot of people busy for their entire careers.
Yeah,
And we need to be, and we can be at the critical tables throughout this time period, making all of this happen for the benefit of our low and moderate income communities. I mean, that's what we're all about, isn't it? That's what the city county task force make sure that opportunity and money that's coming in as a result of fighting climate stays with our community.
Okay, the next thing is how do we educate the public generally? And Lou Fortis is a friend of mine. I haven't talked to him in a while, but we've got to get this idea out into the public. And if you're willing, Dan and Charlie, let me see if I can get a hold of Fortis and see if we can get an article in the Shepherd.
Be on it. Let's do it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know whether we can, I don't know, I can't say that definitely, but I've got a better chance at that than trying to get something in the journal.
Right.
Is my feeling.
If
And
I-
let's get it out in paper and in people's ideas so they start thinking about this and move forward. So I'll call Fortis tomorrow and see if we can meet with him and get him to starting to think about this and talking about it.
great.
If I can add a little bit in terms of where some of the challenges are. My wife is an energy audit for the Passive House movement and does energy audits for Focus on Energy, has been part and parcel with several deep energy retrofit passive homes that are phenomenal in terms of their performance. We're talking about homes in Milwaukee here that are so tightly insulated, they don't need a furnace. The body heat from the residents living in the house is enough to keep the house warm throughout the coldest nights of the year. This is phenomenal stuff. Through her work, I attend a lot of her conferences and workshops within the building industry. And I've watched for the last 10, 15 years, the construction and building industry preparing itself to be able to build these kinds of houses. And what does it take for them to transform their business models and elevate their completed performance of their projects to be within the reach of what is called passive house standards. Passive house standards are becoming the building zone standards for our states and localities. That'll be happening simultaneously over the next years. So everything is moving in this direction. And I think creating an opportunity, we can identify pockets of people from different organizations that say, you know, this is really interesting. Let's spend some quality time among ourselves, educating ourselves and re-envisioning what we can do and what we need to do. The opportunities here, and it's so exciting and challenging. I see that, what is it? It's 8:30.
Indeed. So Julie, you want to wrap us up?
Well, yes, I just want to thank you so much. This has been really very groundbreaking, I think, for many of us to get this kind of information. We have a long ways to go to understand all of this and to be well educated, but you've certainly launched us on a journey that, let's hope, can continue and really make the impact that you're talking about in this community and become a model for other cities also. So it sounds to me like we need to do a couple of things, not only just to meet with Eric Schomburg, but to meet with him with representatives of all those other community groups that you had listed. That so are a community force, not just individuals, and have the city take over and hand it to a corporation to make profits off of. I think we really need to have control of this as a community group and or a collection of community groups. And so I think that there's probably a group of people right here that might like to work on that. And I know Charlie and Dan, Tom Siri sounds like you would like to. Are there other people that might like to stay in contact with them to?
If something like that could evolve and 350 provide sort of the, at least an initial platform for that to happen, I'm certainly on board. And Charlie, I won't speak for you, but this is my my swan song. I mean, I'm 76 years old. I can't think of a better way to spend the next 10 years.
Well,
Okay.
we need to probably call it a night.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Dan.
Yes.
Guys, very interesting.
And anyone who would like to join with this effort, you've got those numbers. Please step up to the plate. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you all.
Got a lot of work to do, but we're up for it.
Time to say
Okay.
goodnight. Thank you
Thank you so much, my friends.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
I know.
Bye. Good night.